Hello and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today I am joined by Dave Roman, who is the host of the Judo Suey podcast. Hello, Dave. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. This is a great honor for me.
No, thank you for your time. I'm sure you're busy. I listen to your podcast and you're always telling stories of being caught up with the trials and tribulations of life.
Yeah. Family of four, full-time job, and then practice whenever I can, going to the club and such.
So usually at the beginning of the podcast, I'd like to give you the opportunity to sort of explain how you've got into judo, why you started learning judo, and, sort of tell your story up to present day, really.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give you the short version. I was introduced to grappling sports as a whole in my mid-20s, starting with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This was probably in the late 90s, maybe about 98. And it was my first exposure to grappling. So this was up when I was living in Boston, Massachusetts area. So I started Jiu-Jitsu, and I was not pleased with when at the club, because I took it for self-defense. I was interested in that sort of thing, and I wasn't pleased that a lot of our grappling rounds started on the knees or just started on the ground. Now, granted, now that I do jiu-jitsu, I completely understand why we do that, but back then I really didn't understand it. Then I was just searching online about standing up and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then I stumbled into this judo versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu debate on one of the old rec martial arts news groups back in the day. And it piqued my interest. I didn't know what judo was, and doing some searching on the Alta Vista search engine that goes way back, doesn't even exist anymore, I came across the Judo Information website. And as soon as I saw what judo was, I thought it was the most beautiful, most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life in terms of a sport. And I didn't start doing judo formally many years later, because I ended up having my first son shortly after that, and with finances and everything. But back in around 2005, or 2006, I should say, I started judo. I pursued the one thing that I knew that I really wanted to do with my life.
And how old were you then, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 31 when I started judo. I was a very fit 31-year-old, but I was already past what I would call my athletic prime for sure.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because I get asked quite often, but not even asked. So the comment is made, "Oh, I'm too old to start." So 31 probably would be considered a relatively late sort of career start, getting into the sport. And how did you find it, sort of in terms of on the body? Because I think that's usually what people are a bit afraid of, or they have the concern around the physical impact it's going to have.
Well, for me, at that time of my life, I wanted to do judo so badly that I didn't care about the impact on the body. And at 31 years old, I still felt like a 21-year-old personally. I was still, I'm 5'6". At the time, I was probably about a very lean 145 pounds. I've managed to maintain that for the most part. So I'm, floating around 155 now. I'm 47 years old. I've always been active. I've always stayed in shape. So I didn't find the impact to my body very bad at all. I worked hard. I always worked hard in all the sports that I took part in, and judo was no exception. So I know that perhaps maybe some adult beginners get into a martial art when they are not in the greatest shape physically, but that was not the case for me. And I was ready to take a beating and just keep coming back.
Now, I've heard you describe yourself as a recreational judo player.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever competed, or have you, the whole time that you've been learning the sport, has it been purely from as learning as a student perspective?
Oh, I've done competitions. I've certainly just local competitions and couple of what they call like the Sunshine State Games. That's where I live in the United States, in Florida. That's kind of the the equivalent of the state championships. But the challenge with being an adult, and I call myself recreational. I have done competitions. I have done what I would call Shiai. There's been, dojo versus dojo Shiai, or even intra dojo Shiai. So, but certainly no real competitive career, unlike yourself. Certainly nothing along those lines. I never went to a national championship or anything like that. I think competition and being exposed to it is important for even for recreational players. I don't think they have to go out and be out there constantly. But I've heard some people say, for every single grade that you're at, you should try and do a competition. I think that's fair. It's been a long time for me since I've competed, simply because it's really, at least in the United States, it's a huge hassle to get into a competition. It's a big cost. And a lot of times in masters divisions, you show up and there's maybe one other person. Sometimes there's nobody there. So that's kind of the state of judo in the United States. So it's been a very long time since I've competed, certainly probably at least 10 years for sure. But I have done local stuff. So so competition is not a foreign thing for me.
So what would you describe as your motivation for continuing to train at this stage?
I love the kinesiology of judo, and to an extent Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's just a passion of mine. I don't know how else to put it. It's like, what keeps an artist painting into their 80s when maybe their best work is behind them. It doesn't matter. It's just really the love of getting out there and interacting with people. And that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, because I wanted to share my passion with people, what I thought would have just been around the country. I really didn't think people around the world would actually listen to it, but I just wanted to be passionate about it as an older recreational player, kind of let people know, hey, I'm out here. I love doing this. I love being out on the mats. And if there's anybody out there that's kind of like me, shoot me an email. Let me hear from you. And it's been a tremendous experience for me. I just love learning judo. I love getting better. Even though I'm getting slower, and older, and certain things hurt from time to time, I'm doing better judo now than I was when I earned my shodan, 11 years ago, by far.
Yeah, something in terms of my judo, I feel, so I've been doing it 25 years now, and I feel as though I've probably made more growth in my knowledge and understanding in the past 3 or 4 years than maybe sort of the 10, 15 years prior to that.
Now, do you attribute that to coaching, do you think?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. How has coaching impacted your own growth?
So I've coached for a long time, but a lot of it previously, my coaching was more as a means to an end. I wasn't entirely invested in it. So I'll explain. So when I was training full time at Kendall Judo Club in the UK, we lived in the judo club. So there's a group of us, and we all sort of slept on camp beds above the kitchen physio room. And we didn't pay any rent, so we coached the kids' classes and did sessions at the club to sort of pay our rent, kind of thing.
Sure.
And they were a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest, because from my point of view, I saw it as a mild inconvenience that got in the way of me being able to rest efficiently for the randori session later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really focus on what I was doing. And then after that, I moved to Manchester. I was coaching at a club in Manchester for a while. And that was sort of my real first taste of having beginners and really having to think about judo to be able to explain what I was actually doing. Because I could do it, but I didn't actually think about what it was that I was doing. And then also how to actually explain that to somebody else who wasn't a judo player, who was just starting and learning. And then so from there, and then when I moved to Australia, and I was coaching more and more, and actually coaching with a focus. And that was where I've got to really sort of think about what it is. People are asking questions, and I've got to be able to answer those questions. And then not even that, we all have a particular way of explaining something, and not everyone is going to automatically understand that way first time. And I've always thought that it's the teacher's responsibility to figure out how to teach something so the student will understand. So then I had to go and think, right, okay, well, this is how I learned. It doesn't mean that everyone learns in the same way. So I've got to think outside the box sometimes to be able to try and explain the same principle in multiple ways. So hopefully everyone can understand.
Now, I've seen your judo. Boy, you really have excellent judo.
Thank you.
You seem like a mount. I don't know how big you are. You seem like a mountain of a man. Maybe everybody around you is just shorter, but you move like a man that's like my size. I don't know, what am I, 165 centimeters. I have trouble converting from inches to centimeters, but I'm 5'6". I'm only about 100 and I float around 70 kilo. You look like you look like a plus 100 kilo player, except a very lean one. I couldn't believe, I look at your statistics. You fought in under 81s and under 90s. You look far more massive to me than that. Did judo come very naturally for you?
Yeah, so I was always pretty good at any sport I sort of put my mind to as a kid. So when I was young, I did heaps. You know, as a young child, I was doing sort of gymnastics and trampoline, a lot of swimming, and then transitioned into doing the judo. And I used to do a lot of running, cross country running and long distance, and played field hockey at school. And anything sort of like I really started to gravitate towards, I had this sort of natural ability at, and then judo just sort of took over as being the main focus. And so to answer your question, I'm 6'2", so that's 188 centimeters. So yeah, but then for a long time, so I first competed at 81s. I think maybe it was 12 or 13. Yeah, and then I stayed under 81s until I think it was about 23. And then that's when I moved up to 90s, and now I fight under 100s.
Yeah.
But I had a good Christmas, so I'm still sitting about 105.
Didn't we all?
So, but yeah, I think that's where, because I spent so much time at under 81 kilos and I had to be fast, it's a very quick division in terms of, you know, gripping, moving, attacking, all, especially compared to sort of 90s and 100s. And I think a lot of that, I'm definitely not as fast as I used to be, carrying a little bit more timber. But I think, you know, that training has stayed with me. So I can move. And I do, like at the club, I train with a lot of the boys. So there's a couple of lads, 60, 66, 73 kilos.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have great practices with them because I try and fight like them. You know, I try and move. I don't just you grip over the top and dominate. I'm sleeve, lapel, trying to use my foot sweeps. And for me, I like training with them because it keeps me fast.
I hear you. I love the movement of judo, and to be able to not take, for a fellow your size, to not take that over the back grip and just hold somebody there, but move, you know, like somebody that's 2 or 3, you know, categories lighter. That's a great thing. It's a great way to practice, especially when I do judo with big guys. That's the ultimate for me. That's what I hope for, that I get. Sometimes I get that, sometimes I don't, but it's always a lot of fun when I do.
Yeah, well, my coach always sort of drilled into Brian Moore. He would always instill the understanding that it doesn't matter who you're fighting, whether it's a white belt or a lower grade or anyone, whoever it is, you can always learn something from them. Yeah. And, you know, so if I'm on with someone lighter or maybe not as experienced, that's when I just work on my foot sweeps, my Waza. Right. I try to use judo that's not going to be using my weight or my strength as an advantage. I go to the things where I have to require timing and, you know, more skill rather than brute force and pig ignorance.
Of course.
You know, there's plenty of big boys at the club where I'm at as well that we can have a a big physical tear up. So
yeah, absolutely.
So just going back to you mentioned about the podcast. Now, someone told me this. I've not done a fact check on this, so maybe you can answer. Was yours the first predominantly judo podcast?
I wouldn't go as far as saying the first ever, because so I know there were judo podcasts before mine. There was a fellow by the name of Lex Friedman who actually has a really huge podcast talking about science and other things. But years ago, he did a podcast interviewing various judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu coaches. And I know there were other judo podcasts, but then they were gone. Then there wasn't any new episodes for a couple of years. So I decided, you know what? Nobody's doing this. I may as well give it a go. It was at the time I decided to start it. My judo coach had tragically passed away in a car accident, and I just was it was at a point in my life where I was like, gosh, he made such a big impact in my life. How can I do something similar? And I'd kicked around the idea of starting a judo podcast. And for a while, I had the name in my mind, and I just decided to go ahead and do it. And it turns out James Austin, with the original judo podcast, he kicked his off about a week after mine, so I enjoy listening to his, and he's listened to mine. So, but I think mine came out a week before his, after that break of other people doing podcasts. And I think it had been a couple of years. So I won't go as far as saying I'm the first. Maybe of the new generation, you could say I was the first.
So I know James. I used to his brother Stuart.
Okay.
We were on the team together, and the British team all the way through from sort of like 13-year-olds.
Right.
So
I figured you knew. Now, how did you end up in? So this is what I don't understand. How did you? I looked at your competition record. You represented Great Britain. How'd you end up all the way out in Australia?
So I'm from the UK. So I'm from a small town called Bacup, which is in the sort of northwest of England. That's where I started learning judo, and I was on the British team from maybe, I don't know, about 12 or 13, I think. I won my first British medal, British National Championship medal as a cadet. And then competed and then trained full time after university, all the way through to about 2014, I think. And then in 2012, I did a trip. I wanted to do a bit of a around the world trip. So I went to Japan for 8 weeks.
Oh, nice.
And then moved down to Sydney. So I just traveled down to Australia for 4 weeks. During that time, trained at a few different clubs. And then I flew up to Hong Kong and traveled up to Beijing, and then back to the UK. And, during my travels over the years, obviously met people and made a lot of friends. One of those was a guy called Mark Brewer, who I actually just had on my podcast recently. He's a New Zealand player, and I was talking to him. He's based in Sydney, and then I was looking for a bit of a change of pace, and he said, "Why don't you come out here?" He knew a guy who had a judo club, and it turned out I'd trained at the guy's judo club, so I just sort of sent him my resume and just said, "Listen, I'm interested in coming out to work. Is that all good?" And he was like, "Yeah, no worries. Out you come." And he took a chance on me, and I came out, and that was nearly 7 years ago.
Wow, nice.
And then I've been here since, building life, and coaching at his club and representing Zenbu Judo Club, and then the state area. And
and I take it you're one of the coaches there.
Yeah. So I've been running the junior program, and then I've been doing some sort of adult beginner classes, because up until recently I was also competing, and I find it very hard to have one foot in the coaching, one foot in the athlete bracket. Sure. And I'm very selfish. So when I want to train, I just want to get on with it. I don't really think about anyone else. And that is a terrible position to be in. If you're a coach, you've got to be selfless. So now I've taken a bit of a back step from the competing side of things, and I'm focusing more on coaching. So I'm doing a lot more coaching classes and one-on-ones and this kind of thing. So that's more of my focus now.
Do you find privates hard to, have you ever, you said one-on-one, so I assume that's private lessons?
Yeah.
How do you teach? Because I've had people come up to me, like even in my own club, asking about privates, and I'm like, gosh, I feel like I need an uke. I feel like I would need an experienced uke to be able to teach privates. Like, are you able to do a true one-on-one, or do you have somebody else come and help you be an uke?
No, I do it all myself.
Huh.
The only time so last year I smashed my shoulder up and tore the ligaments in my AC joint, and then for a couple of weeks I got a couple of the similar sized athletes together. I did sort of paired up coaching, so 1-on-2 type of thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I just do it all myself. It's to me, I
Okay.
find it the easiest thing, and I coach female players that are like under 57s,
Yeah.
all the way up to guys bigger than me. So
Sure.
to me, it's just part of being a good uke. And to be able to coach, for me, a lot of it's about feel. I can feel if something's good. And we do a lot of video. So I do a lot of filming as well. So I have like a little tripod set up and we film the throws. And then I
Oh,
can do a little
nice.
bit of video analysis of it and show the people sometimes because you do need that visual reference. But for the most part, I'm trying to get the athlete. I mean, it depends who I'm coaching because I've got a lot of beginners who are just looking to grade, just want to learn the sport, don't necessarily want to come to the big classes because it's maybe a bit intimidating or it just doesn't fit with their schedule.
Sure.
And then when I get to the competition players, like they already know what they're doing. It's just more about working through different scenarios, gripping strategies, playing out different positioning, and putting the person under a lot of pressure. Really,
Right.
a
Right.
lot of throwing, a lot of randori, that kind of thing. So,
Nice. Nice. That sounds great.
and you coach yourself, don't you? At your club, I'm sure I've
I
heard
I
you say
do
that.
I
And
do yeah I so it currently we're trying to figure out a consistent schedule. The head instructor at the club, which it's actually a jujitsu club, we're trying to iron out a schedule. I know I will be teaching pretty soon. I've taught in a assistant capacity, and there's been times where I've taken over a class if the instructor can't make it, but we're trying to iron out a good schedule that this would be my first experience with this being my own thing, and I can't wait. I know it's going to happen. I can't wait to do it. I love teaching judo. I love because for myself, starting at 31 years old, I understand the aspect of somebody. Even though I was athletic coming into the sport, I understand the challenges that adults have starting judo compared to younger people starting judo. Certainly the adult over 31, the way that I would teach them, I would be a lot more patient. I would cover different aspects and focus on what I know they can do instead of throwing a whole bunch of things onto them. I'm very I'm very into the details, teaching the details of techniques and the hows and the why things work, and I'm able to do that without being too chatty about it, if you know what I mean. But I love teaching. I sometimes the guys at my club, they ask me about how did you do this, or certain gripping sequences that work quite well in jujitsu, but quite frankly, and certain little things that I do, even things judo Waza that I do in jujitsu, things that I've carried over from judo into jujitsu has worked really well. So I enjoy teaching all aspects of judo. I love sharing what I'm passionate about.
I listened to your first podcast this morning. So I've
Yep.
listened to your podcast over the years here and there. I've not
You
listened to every episode religiously, but I realized this morning, I was like, I can't listen to actually your first ever podcast.
you
And I
did.
listened to
God
it,
bless you.
yeah,
That was rough. My
on the way.
my first my first 30 episodes were pretty rough. And then
Well,
I think I
actually,
finally managed to do all right.
it's interesting you said that because one of the things that struck me when I was listening to it, I was thought, I just actually how smooth you came across in terms of your delivery and the way you presented the information. And I was going to ask if do you have a background in anything similar to podcasting before?
No, no, never. I just a lot of a lot of the smoothness, at least back then, came from creative editing. So there was a lot of the way that my microphone technique and the way that Sometimes I would pause the recording, and then when I come back, I would kind of take a breath and continue on my train of thought. There's times where I could pause the recording, get up, get a drink of water, come back, and start recording, and it all sounds really smooth because I edit out the little, the clicks of the mouse or the break in audio that sometimes people can hear. So I've been done a lot of creative editing over the years, especially in the early going when it came to recording. So that's some of that's me, but a lot. There's a lot of pauses and a lot of let me think about how I'm going to say it this way, and then I'd start over and I continue and such. So I think I've gotten better over the years, but if you thought I was smooth in the beginning, I'll take that as a compliment. I listen to my old stuff, and quite frankly, I'm embarrassed.
Well, I don't know if it made me feel a bit better. I was the same in terms of, so when I first put a camera and I was like, right, I'm going to start doing these videos and do the technical stuff, and it would take me, I don't know, an hour, maybe longer, to film a 5-minute intro or less.
Oh,
and I don't know. When I was in front of a class, I could talk for hours. You have a trouble. The hard part is getting me to shut up. Soon as the camera was in front of my face, I was just getting locked up, and my brain would go dead. And I couldn't believe how difficult it was. I thought it'd just be, there we are, camera, off you go. And even now, like I feel far more comfortable doing it after maybe 2 years now of doing the content and doing that type of thing. But yeah, my word, it was hard in the beginning.
Yeah, I've refused to put myself. I was just talking to one of my friends this past weekend when I was back home. Not home. My home's in Tampa. Well, not anymore. My home's in Florida, but I grew up in New York City and in the Boston area in Massachusetts. So I was up there over the weekend, and one of my friends was asking me, "Hey, why don't you put on a camera and put it up on YouTube?" And for me, that would be so much work, and it would just come off terribly. I just care about the audio, so it's hard to be in front of a camera. I don't even when we're doing this interview right here, I keep the video off because I find it distracting for whatever reason. Even just seeing my own face in the bottom corner, whenever I'm doing work meetings and I'm on my Teams meeting, I usually keep the camera off unless they ask me to turn it on. So yeah, I'm a bit camera shy, but not shy behind the mic.
Yeah, well, it's TV versus radio personalities, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you remember what your first episode was about? What you talked about?
Yeah, leg grabs. I'll never forget it. The leg grab rule. I think the other reason why I started the podcast was I was so sick and tired. So I'm one of the guys that actually think in terms of the IJF, which I love watching the IJF. I love watching international judo. I think the leg grab ban was a good thing for sport judo. I've softened my stance over the past couple of years, mainly because of the listeners changing my mind, that I would like, in terms of leg grabs, I would like to see leg grab techniques for national level tournaments and below. But I think banning leg grabs at the highest level of judo is great. I think it's good. I think it's good for the sport, honestly. And I guess I was just in a mood. I was just on Reddit. I saw you more complaining about leg grabs. At the time, it was 6 years after the ban. Even I know you poke around Reddit every once in a while. You still have people complaining about the leg grab ban 11 years after the fact. I'm like, my God, so for me, when the leg grab ban happened, it really didn't impact my judo one bit. And I think what I was trying to get across in that first episode, if I recall, is that I think people who have a tendency to really wish that leg grabs were back think that grabbing the legs is somehow this cure-all for struggling in judo. And I don't agree with that at all. So my first episode was on leg grabs, that I was defending the leg grab ban.
Yeah, I agree with you on the leg grab thing. And in terms of my style of judo, it definitely benefited me having leg grabs removed. And it made me sending in my Osoto and my Harai Goshi a lot safer.
Yeah,
I spent a
I
long
saw
time.
yeah. I saw your under 100 kilo Australian final match, and that Osoto Gari was a technique after my own heart. That's exactly how I do my Osoto. It's my favorite technique to do. And you won gold with the same way that I do it. You do it 100 times better, but in my mind, I envision myself doing it just like you.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to get it to that stage. I've
Yeah,
been learning that technique since, I don't know, maybe 20 years now.
sure, of course.
And yeah, it's definitely easier to do when someone's not trying to grab you by the bollocks and throw you with Tiguruma.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what I found interesting listening to that first podcast was just how similar, in some ways, it was to the recent podcast episode you did on the new rules.
Ah,
And
yes.
it's just the same complaints, the same sort of conspiracy theories, and I just thought it was just interesting. And like you say, people are still whinging about it today, and just as if, yeah. I mean, I don't understand it personally because I think the rules are good.
I do too. I think all of the rule changes they made recently is good for the sport. I think I love the change on the Wazari, even though the first couple of tournaments I didn't watch. I don't know about you. I did not watch Tel Aviv today. I was just too busy working. I got 3 monitors in front of me. I couldn't commit a third monitor to the judo tournament. So most of it, like I did for Paris, because it was just one of those weeks for me. But this week it's not possible. So I think the referees are getting used to the new changes on Wazari. I'm still seeing some forward-facing Wazari calls, and I don't like it. I've been complaining about that since the past Olympic cycle. And I love the rule change. I know some people, even some competitors, complained about it. I love the rule change on the Uchimata where they're no longer scoring that step over. It's hard for me to describe. It's not really a Uchimata Tsukashi. It's a different type of.
No,
It's like they kind of.
It's a dragon roll.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So I mean, I've lost a lot of forehead skin to being
Yeah.
dragged over the mat back in the day.
Yeah.
Getting the nice mat burn down the middle of my face from that, and then then the insult to injury is getting the sort of the coke
score
at the end of it. You just like,
right.
and it's just horrible judo. I mean, there's so many. Again, when people complain about that, I mean, there's so many beautiful counters to Uchimata, and just work on being better at those would be my sort of response to anyone complaining. The dragon roll is just horrible.
Yeah. So my feeling on it is just use it as a skillful entry into Waza. But don't score it. I don't think that should be a score. And I'm glad they changed that rule. I think you and I would agree the big rule change is that reverse Seanagi ban, which I don't know, but I'm sure. Well, you hang around some really, really good judo players. I've never seen reverse Seanagi thrown by, and any clinic at any tournament I've ever observed in person. So I don't know what all the complaining was about. And I don't know if you've noticed, but seems like that ban didn't impact Korea one bit because they've been dominant the past couple of tournaments. You got the Portugal Grand Prix and the Paris Grand Slam. Korea has done really well. So I don't think that change really impacted them one bit.
No, not even slightly. It was an element of their judo. It wasn't their sole. It wasn't the only thing that they were able to throw with. They're such a versatile athletes. When I hear stuff like that and the conspiracy theories, and it's the same with the leg grabs. They're just trying to do over sort of the Russians and like as if Georgia aren't dominating most competitions at the minute. And Georgia were one of the countries known for leg grabs, sort of like 15 years ago, and they're absolutely destroying everyone without having to leg grab anyone. So it's just, I don't know. For me, it's just I think if the IJF were a little bit more transparent I mean, at the end of the day, they don't have to be, right? But if they were a little bit more transparent, then it would maybe prevent as many sort of conspiracy theories and, as confusion and people coming up with their own sort of ideas and reasons, right?
I completely agree. The reverse Sayanagi, there's only one person I've only ever allowed to practice it on me because I trusted that person. To me, it's a very dangerous throw. You got to have a lot of skill. And, when you, especially in a left versus right situation, that throw can easily become a throw where you're practically throwing, for lack of a better term, uke with ude garami. And, the IJF has already had a long-standing rule against using arm locks as part of a throw. That rule changed a long time ago. So when I look at reverse Sayanagi and its potential to be the type of throw where you're locking out somebody's arm as you're performing it, I think I'm okay with the rule change. I mean, there was you do miss a really dynamic throw, but if they had evidence, which allegedly this was the case, that you're seeing cadets and juniors getting injured, I think they made the right decision. Because the worst thing, I'm sure you could speak to this as a competitor, when you have a teammate or even somebody in the competition that you're friendly with. Nobody wants to see a broken arm on the middle of the tatami on a competition, right? I mean, nobody. I mean, that's just a terrible thing to see.
Yeah. So we had one of our area squad sessions on Wednesday, and one of the referees from Sydney is on the International Judo Federation referees. He was at the Olympics refereeing. I think he was in Paris, maybe Portugal. Anyway, and he just did a bit of a run through of all the rules for the players, because the competition. We've got our first competition this weekend of the year, sort of in Australia. So they were going through the stuff. So that was one of the questions. And he put it was down to injury, what you said. Also, the fact that players are just going down on the back of their heads because their arms tied up. Sometimes both arms are tied up. And because of the nature of the direction of the throw, players are just going onto their heads. And there's, I think, a few concussions at the sort of lower levels and things like that. Yeah. So the representative
from the IJF confirmed that.
Yeah, that's what he said when we asked him. Yeah.
Okay.
So now again, all the IJF had to do was say that, and people would be like, they can still complain about it, but then it's not going to be like, oh well, this is a conspiracy to try and like undermine South Korean judo.
I wish they did the same thing. I wish they were more transparent when they made the rule on leg grabs, because I do believe the prevailing truth is it was an International Olympic Committee issue when they removed leg grabs, because it was hard to argue that judo prior to 2010 and freestyle wrestling looked very different. I mean, at the lower weights, there was a lot of similarities. It looked like wrestling in a gi. So I've always believed the official, I've always believed the unofficial word that the reason they took away leg grabs was because of pressure from the IOC. That's always made sense to me. Some of these conspiracies about trying to ensure Japanese dominance in judo and things like that, I just always thought that was nonsense. It would have been nice if the IJF was more transparent with that, just like with the it would have been nice this time around with the reverse Sayanagi.
Yeah, I mean that's my understanding of the leg grabs as well, and I'm pretty sure there was talk of wrestling being removed from the Olympics as a sport back then
it was temporarily, and then it was put back.
Yeah, so I think
it's all
judo,
political,
Yeah, I mean, I still don't see it as the best reason, but I think judo was just trying to distance itself from the wrestling. And I mean, the counter argument to the whole Russian conspiracy would be the fact that Russia completely dominated the Olympics in 2012.
Oh, yeah,
when leg grabs it was a direct Hansoku-mak for leg grabs at that point.
Yeah,
and Russia won, I think, 3 gold medals perhaps, and some bronzes. I don't think Japan won a single gold medal that year. in the men's anyway.
Those Olympics, I would have to look.
2012. I'm pretty sure it was Russia got 3, Korea got 2, and Georgia and France got the other 2.
Wow, yeah, I would have to take a look. I did not watch the 2012 Olympics. I did catch 2016.
I was there.
You were there, right?
I don't know. Like this story. So we the mat area, the platform for the mat area that they used at the Olympics and the Com Games in 2014 was built in near where my judo club is. And so during the testing phase, they invited us down to do judo on the platform to see if there's any issues, any structural design flaws, or anything like that. And then, so my judo coach, he basically proposed that there needed to be this team of inspectors at the Olympics and the Com Games to make sure that this platform didn't fall down. So we basically got access all area pass to keep an eye on the warm-up area and the main platform area to provide maintenance throughout the Olympics. So yeah, we got front row seats to the Olympics, which was
wow.
If you can't compete, it's probably like the next best thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just so you know, I pulled up the results of the 2012 games. You're right. Russia did take 3 gold. Japan did have 1 gold, 3 silver and 3 bronze. I believe it was probably on the women's side. I would have to take a look.
So yeah, I mean, I suppose that to a certain degree that would go against the whole idea that it was trying to screw Russia over. I mean, Japan have come back with a vengeance in the sort of the past 2 Olympics, especially obviously 2020.
They're so dominant. I mean, it's really unreal. That entire team. I mean, I don't know if like the Abe siblings are going to retire. I don't know who's going to if Hashimoto's going to retire, but it just seems like next man up with that team. And they've just got dominant players. They're so deep. It's almost unfair for the rest of the world. It really is.
Have you ever trained in Japan?
Never. I've never been. That's on my bucket list. But I have not gone over there yet. I'm debating. I'm not too far away from being 50. I'm debating either Japan or visiting the Netherlands and visiting London. I've always wanted to see London, so I haven't decided yet. But what on my 50th birthday, I'm crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific. I'm going somewhere that is not on this side of the world to visit a different country.
Yeah, nice. And what will you do? Will you do some judo when you visit, or will it just be purely just to relax?
No, I won't. I don't think I'll do judo because I'll be with my wife. Okay. Though I suppose maybe I could send her, maybe she'd like to do her own thing while I visit a club, but it'll probably be just a straight up vacation, or I believe they call it holiday where you're from.
Yeah, holiday. I mean, I've been to Japan 4 times now, 3 for judo, 1 for a holiday. Obviously been to London many times and the Netherlands as well. So
you ever train at the universities?
You're not going to go wrong with any of those. Yeah. So in Japan, I trained at Tsukuba, Tokai, and Meiji.
Okay, I know somebody who trained at school. He was a guest on the podcast a couple of years ago. Chris Round from the US here.
Yeah, out of the 3 that I went to, Tsukuba was my least favorite.
Oh, was it? How come?
I found it too relaxed.
Too relaxed.
Best way to put it. So
yeah,
Tokai, especially in Meiji, they were just, it was just fighting, and it was proper sort of what I was used to, kind of randori, but with just getting thrown more. So Tsukuba just beautiful judo, just incredible judo, but it was very slow paced, and I just found it difficult to settle in to that kind of style. I didn't feel as though it necessarily benefited my style of judo.
Of course,
yeah,
and you were a competitor at the time, so you
yeah.
you needed to be pushed.
So
For me, that's that sounds like a great day for me, and I probably couldn't even hang at Suba anymore. I'm I would probably have to find. I'd probably just end up at the if I went to Japan, I'd probably just end up at the Kodokan and spend the day at one of their randori sessions, and that would be enough for me. At my age and things like that. That would be plenty challenging for me and plenty fun.
So one of the biggest lessons that I actually learned was at scuba, to be honest, and it wasn't sort of like a physical lesson. It was more of a mental, staying humble kind of lesson. So I went there after the 2010 World Championships because one of my teammates was competing. Michael Holly, he fought. And so I went out to watch him, and then I decided to stay for I think 6 weeks. I went to Tokai, and then went to I went to Meiji, Tokai, and Scuba. I think that trip actually, and then just make sure I get the name right. Is it Nishiyama won silver? Got beat by Iliadis, I think, in the under 90 kilos. And Nishiyama was only a young player, and he went to scuba. And then when I was there, they were getting ready for the university championships or one of the big sorts of competitions. And Nishiyama, fresh off his silver medal at the World Championships, was being used as an Egikomi partner for the university team. Just getting bounced around the mat, and because I think about it like if someone because I was based in the UK, then I was thought, if someone from the UK had won a silver medal at the World Championships, there's no way they'd be an Egikomi partner just for like the university team, like 2 weeks later. And he's just sort of that, like, yep, no, that's it, whatever, World Championship silver on, just carry on. It's obviously it's an impressive achievement, but then also like, the next day is a new day, and you just got to carry on and support your team.
Of course.
And it was that sort of like humility, I think, just really sort of stuck with me over the years.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting. How long were you at those clubs or universities?
So the first time I went to Japan, did 4 weeks. Second time did 6 weeks total, and then the third time I did 8 weeks. So
were you self-funded?
Like 2 weeks. Yeah, self-funded. So I always went in sort of end of August, September. So it was always really humid because I'd decided at the beginning of the year what I was going to do, and then save up, basically, save my money up, and then go. So it was all paid for by myself and the bank of mum and dad and grandma, really.
Now I think you might be the first person I've ever spoken to that represented Great Britain as a judoka. What is funding like for you for athletes in Great Britain? Are judoka high level competitor, high performance athletes supported in a decent way there, or do you have to work a job while you train and that kind of thing?
So I'm not 100% sure what it's like right now. So I've been out of the sort of that system for like 7 years. I've also been in Australia, so I can't 100% comment on what it is like now. I was funded for a while as an athlete, and it was good when I was on the funding. But there was always a requirement for just doing a bit of work on the side, and then for a long while as a senior player, I wasn't funded. I just didn't get the results from the transition from junior to senior. Sure. At the beginning, so I wasn't funded for a good couple of years when I was a full-time athlete. So from my own personal experience, I was trying to find money, working any job I could, part-time work, and sort of beg, borrow, steal kind of mentality.
Of course.
From the other players that I know that were funded, a lot of those still had jobs.
They did.
Yeah, obviously the pressure wasn't there for them to need to work, but the funding wasn't enough to just be able to live off and train and fun trips without that little bit of just that little side earner as well, just to help.
You're right.
And from what I know in Australia, it's even worse here.
Yeah, Australia has some pretty interesting challenges from what I understand with well, I'm only, I'm on the other side of the world here, so I only hear stories. And maybe not just Australia. I kind of lump Australia and New Zealand is kind of having the same challenges where both countries are an island, and you have to travel pretty far to get to any significant tournaments, on the International Judo Federation tour. I mean, that's got to be tough for athletes out there. I would think, maybe not, but I would think that it would be tough.
The way I see it, from my experience being here, it's not even that stage is okay.
That's so okay.
Once the players are at that level, like there's a team at the minute that are doing a 5-week trip, and they're doing some of the European Cups, some of the Grand Slams, and so they go away for 5 weeks, and then they squeeze in camps, and they do a block, and that's, I'm going to say, relatively easy. The thing I see is the issue is that they don't have so I went to my first trip abroad when I was 12, right? And we went to Sweden, and we did a competition in Lugi, and I mean, there might have 600 people, kids there, sort of cadets and juniors, and it was an experience. And the first time I got disqualified. I've only ever disqualified in judo twice. So I was fighting, I can remember it clear as day. I was fighting a German, came in for this really rough uchimata and just went straight down on my head and got disqualified for head diving. And then basically spent a week having the shit kicked out of me on this training camp.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a defining moment for me. And, went back the next year, won a bronze medal, found the training camp far more manageable. But, I had this experience as a 12-year-old. I've got teammates that have gone to Europe now, and it's their first competition at a European Cup level. Mm-hmm. And that's their first trip overseas, and they're in the mid-20s.
Oh, wow.
So they're not getting, so they're building that momentum now in the mid-20s, and they've not had that experience as a younger athlete. So that's where I think it's a lot harder out here, because you can't just do, like, we just went over to Sweden for, a week, did the competition camp. There's a group of 20 of us, and we were back, and it cost us like, maybe 200 quid, something, cheap.
Sure.
You're looking at thousands to be able to get over to Europe, and then you've got to stay over there for weeks to make it worthwhile. So it's very different. So I think that's where the issue lies, is that the players aren't getting exposed to that style of training and competing at a young enough age.
Right. Now, instead of going over to countries like Sweden, do Australian teams and high performance athletes, do they go perhaps to Japan? It seems geographically closer. Maybe I don't really know. I'm just curious how Korea, you all manage that. Okay, Japan and Korea, yeah.
Yeah, so they're common, and I know. There's two brothers, so Nathan and Josh Katz, and they've been to the Olympics.
I'm familiar with I think Nathan. Didn't he go to this year's Olympics?
Yeah, so Nathan went to the Olympics. They both went in 2016, and then Nathan went in 2020 in Tokyo. Now I met both those boys in Camberley Judo Club in the UK. I think back in 2013, right? So what was that? 2013. So 9 years ago. Right. So during their school holiday, so in Australia, the summer holiday is from school is December to January. So they were going over to the UK because their parents, both judo players as well, had connections with Camberley Judo Club. So they'd go over and train for 5-6 weeks in the UK and do some of the competitions in Europe. So they were spending Christmas away and doing what was sort of required of them to be able to experience that. So there are players that are doing, the ones that are taking it seriously and invest and are able to invest, and obviously got supportive parents. They are going over to Europe and doing, because that's what's required, right? You've got to go to where the judo is, whether it's Japan, or Europe, a target-rich environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just what I want to ask you, and I mentioned this to you earlier. So I've noticed you make this comment a couple of times, and I've thought about messaging you about it, and I was like, right, when we decided to do the podcast, I thought I'll wait and ask you. So I've seen you
Sure.
made this comment regarding the Australian grading system.
Oh, yeah, yes. So so before I say anything, I want to make it clear that this is just an outsider looking in, right? So I don't know the ins and outs of how Australia or even by extension, I don't even know if it's such thing as by extension or like New Zealand or any countries out in Oceania. Is that how you say it? Oceania?
Yeah, Oceania.
Oceania. Okay, sorry. See, it's different ways to say it. I think from what I have read and observed and some of the stories I've heard, I think Australia has arguably the toughest grading requirements in the world, that the toughest I've ever heard. And I always find it curious when I see or when I read stories about how Australia does things, because I my opinion is I think it's important for judo organizations to have clear, definable, and achievable paths to advancement in rank. Because judo has a ranking system. It's not a perfect system, but it's what judo has. And unfortunately, being able to coach in judo is tied to what rank you are in many judo organizations. I don't know if that's what the rules are in Australia, but I know in a lot of other countries, for example, you have to be an EQ level at minimum to be able to coach at any level. So I've always found some of the stories, and again, there's stories. I don't know if they're true. I don't think people would lie about some of the things that I've heard, but it seems like Australia has really stringent guidelines. And sometimes when I hear these stories and I read about the guidelines, I'm left wondering to what end. So again, you know, Australia is going to do what they feel is best for their judo program, obviously. I just don't, from an outsider's perspective, I don't know what the end game is for having such stringent requirements. Because if it's, because when you have such stringent requirements, I think you can alienate a potentially untapped market of adults, 20 and up, starting judo and being able to contribute to judo in a very meaningful way. Just I just, so I don't know if I've got any of that right or wrong. I don't know what your perspective on. I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because I think you've read some of my posts online where I'm like, well, wow, what's going on? I don't see how this actually benefits, because my whole thing is the growth of judo. Do you have not you, but does your organization, any sport organization, have a policy in place that encourages growth or restricts it? And when I, as an outsider looking in some of the way that certain judo organizations are ran, I kind of wonder, how is it that they are promoting growth with those kind of strict requirements?
Yeah, so this is the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because I agree with what you're saying. Now I
Okay.
graded up to third dan in the UK, and then I graded to fourth dan in Australia. So obviously got like first-hand experience of going through both grading systems.
Sure.
And in the UK, the grading system is far more, I'm not going to say relaxed. Maybe the theory side of requirements is far more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Now I up to third dan, I always did a line out. to
Right.
get the points to
In
be
the
able
UK,
to.
it's a fighting system. You earn
Yeah, I've
points
always
through.
all the way through. So we used to go to organized competition, like basically gradings, and it'd just
Sure.
be like a competition. And instead of being categorized to a certain degree, you'd be categorized by weight, but you'd be basically put together with your grade, and then it would sort of be chopped around. But it'd be like a full day competition,
Right.
and then all the way through. And then there was still the element of having to. So you'd have to do your theory at the club, and the coach would then sign you off and be like, "Okay, so David is up to green belt theory." Okay. And
Sure.
then you'd go to your competition, you go to the grading, and then, if you won enough fights to be able to then also qualify for the competition side, you'd get signed up to your green belt, for example. Right. And if you didn't,
Right.
you maybe go to orange and a couple of tabs or whatever. Right. So, but yeah, so you always had to fight all the way through, fought for my black belt, and then every grading, every sort of downgrade after that. But then from my memory, basically, so for my first dan, you had to demonstrate the first line of the Nagana Kata.
Sure.
For your second dan, you had to do the first and second line of the Nagana Kata, right? So it was ridiculously basic. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'll tell you the story anyway. So for my third dan theory, I did it over the phone with my coach. I won't say his name, but yeah. So I basically did it over the phone. But I was a national team player, and I was away.
Well, that's my point. Right. Look, my whole thing when it comes to this kind of stuff, there are always exceptions, right? And somebody like yourself that represented Great Britain, you're the exception. Somebody like me, I would never be afforded that, and nor should I, because I was not an exceptional competitor. So, you going through something like that, it's to me, that's perfectly fine. Does anybody really debate or argue that you don't know it? You know what I mean? It's kind of, I hear what you're saying, but phone call or whatever, but it's not like you don't know it. You've been doing this for over 2 decades now,
Yeah. So and that was always my understanding, and that's how I always felt. And I know I had friends in the same position who competing at the really high level internationally and winning the sort of the line outs at the gradings, and it was just sort of like, yep, no worries, here's your grade. But yeah, in Australia, the grading systems, you're having to do like the first line of your kata to get from your orange to green belt.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule, because is it within the clubs, but technically on the grading syllabus you have to be able to demonstrate the first line of the Nagana Kata. And then when you're getting up towards your first dan, you have to do the full, and then in some cases you have to do it as both uke and tori and uke. So you have to demonstrate it both way around. And then so for my fourth dan, I did the Kimi no Kata.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, and I had to do that for both tori and uke.
Now, how did you learn that? Because one of the challenges that I find, at least in the United States, is being able to find somebody, especially since somebody yourself as a competitor, you're surrounded around the sport aspect of judo. So was it a challenge for you to even find somebody to teach you the kata? Did you have to travel, or did you already have contacts within Zenbu Judo that could teach you this kata?
So kata is a much bigger part of the sport out here. So Zenbu has Zenbu has national champions in the Nagano Kata. Okay. And guys that are competing. So all the competitions. So like this weekend is the ACT Open down in Canberra. So there's the regular sort of competition side of it, but then there's also the kata. So most of the competitions do have a kata competition element. So we've got a couple of guys from the club who are going doing the Goshin Jitsu kata. So from my perspective, I'm in a very fortunate position, that I have got that. I have got people that are incredibly skilled in the kata and knowledgeable to help me, or I would have struggled. And through that, to be honest with you, my opinion on kata's changed. through that and through doing the IJF Academy coaching qualification.
Changed in what way?
I thought it was just always a load of crap. And I didn't really fully appreciate the lessons that could be learned from it. And I think it's just because I was never really, because the kata isn't as deemed as important. And the club I'm from in the UK, it wasn't really that big a part of it. And so I didn't really quite understand the kata, and I sort of had a bit of an ignorant, naive view of it. Now, again, I think it's an element, and I think it's an important element in the learning and the continuation of the history of the sport. I don't put too much stock in it, but I put a lot more than I used to.
Of course, when I tested for my Nidan, I had to teach myself Nage no Kata, and that was probably one of the most difficult endeavors I've ever pursued, not just in judo, ever. Because not only did I had to read books, I watched video, I broke down everything, and then I had to teach my uke how to do it. I mean, it was hard. I worked hours on it for gosh, seemingly like 8 months. It was tough, not because I couldn't do the techniques. It was just doing the techniques within the kata correctly. It was hard. It was harder than learning any single combination or really anything in any sport that I've ever done. It was really, really, really difficult to do. But as a result of that kind of practice, I developed the left side. I'm a right-sided player, but I developed the left side, and I do some throws just as well on my left as I do it on my right, and it's really opened up my game tremendously. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't have achieved that through other means, but by really dedicating myself to trying to do the best that I could with the kata, it developed the left side, and there's times that it doesn't, like, as now that I'm older, I don't grip fight anywhere near as much as I used to. But these days, I don't need to, because the grip doesn't even matter that much. I mean, we're just talking about, hard randori versus competition. But honestly, these days for me, it doesn't matter if, whatever grip you take. I'll just grab whatever you give me, and I'll go left or right, and I'll get to where I need to go, even though I'm slower than I used to be. But when I said earlier in the podcast that even at my age, I'm doing the best judo that I've ever done, that learning Nage no Kata was a big part of that.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, at my exam, I'm a lefty, but through doing more coaching and the fact that most of the students are right-handed,
right,
I've been having to demonstrate to the right, and so my right-handed judo is still nowhere near like as proficient or as comfortable as doing it to the left. But
sure,
just from having to demonstrate these throws and actually demonstrate them, and so they look good, so I can teach them. My right-handed judo has come on a treat. So it's interesting. It's whatever. Like for years, I was like always thinking about, I should try to learn right-handed judo. I never did as a competitor,
right?
But then have done these past couple of years just to be able to coach. So yeah, it's interesting, the thing that gets you there.
And it's funny, that is a shame of when athletes get older, because I've had to face that with other sports. When I listen to other athletes, interviews in various sports, because I love following various sports, whether that's American football or basketball. It's a lot of athletes really start figuring out how to become more efficient in their sport, but the aging is catching up with them. And I have a saying that I'm very fond of that I find is very true, is that Father Time is undefeated. So, you can become more knowledgeable in something, but no matter how, you get older and you get slower, and even if you were to cheat and take performance enhancing supplements or whatever the case may be, Father Time's undefeated. You're going to slow down. You're not going to be as athletic as you once were, even though your knowledge and your ability might expand as you get older. It's just the athletic ability just goes away, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part. I was having this conversation with, I was back in the UK with one of my old coaches and mentors from the club, a guy called Clark Nutter. And he was saying how it's interesting that for some athletes, all those points converge at the same time, and then they're the ones that become like world champions, Olympic
Right.
champions, right? So everything just seems to dial in for them at the
It
right
just
time.
clicks. Yeah.
And for me, like my mental game, my preparation, the pressure I put on myself, my abilities now, it's so much better than what they were 10 years ago when I was trying to be that high performance athlete. Um, but like you say, now like maybe the desire is not as there as much to compete, and my focus is on other things, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit slower, and these, and yeah. So it's interesting how for some people it just happens at the right time. All those points come together, and then for the majority of us, yeah, like you say, it just comes at the different times, and then it's as you say, you get older and you're like, oh, I'm ready now, I'm ready, but then
I'm ready now. Yeah.
the
And the
body's
body doesn't
not.
react.
Yeah, so and it's quite interesting, and I suppose quite humbling as well. And he's going back to what you're saying about the when you're coaching older players, and it's sticking to coaching them what they're able to do and what they what's capable for their bodies, and putting into context what they want to get out of it.
Yeah. And I think if the older adults, I think have a lot to offer. And the thing for me, even though I started at 31, judo really changed my life for the better. It really did. And you know what? I know in Australia, and I believe it's kind of similar in the UK, and I know for sure in the United States, Brazilian jiu-jitsu has just become far more popular in terms of adults entering it than judo. And I just think judo is so great that judo can offer the same exact things that Brazilian jiu-jitsu does. And a lot of people out there, they just say, oh yeah, the falls or the impacts and stuff. Meanwhile, they let themselves get heel hooked and get their knees on the verge of getting a torn ACL and MCL. But they think judo is far more impactful for some reason. I understand that the learning curve is much higher for judo, but I believe a good coach can still flatten that learning curve to a point where you can make somebody effective with just proper coaching. I really believe that. My own judo coach, I mean, he happened to learn from Jason Morris and Jimmy Pedro, who are some of the all-time greats in American judo. So I learned from him what he learned from them. So I was very fortunate to have a fantastic judo coach while I was learning for the majority of my time. But but the way he taught me, it resonated with me. He just didn't tell me to just step in here, pull here, and then bend at the waist, and there you got to throw. He really broke down the nuances on why throws worked, and he taught me in a very intelligent way. And I think that if people can teach other adults in an intelligent way, and I'm sure you do, I'm just saying when I see judo instruction as a whole, a lot of judo instructors teach adults like they teach children, and they put them through the same paces that they put children through. And I just think that's bad for retaining adults. And I can't stress it enough. I think there's an untapped market of people that, yeah, you're not going to get a world champion or an Olympic hopeful from a 20-year-old starting judo. You're not going to get that. But you don't have to have that if you have enthusiastic people becoming training partners for potentially other people who could be Olympic hopefuls. I just think that everybody of every age can have something to offer. And I think when I see Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they've managed to sell that. Most of my training partners at jiu-jitsu, they are 35 and older. We got a lot of younger guys too, but I've got training partners that I can roll with and trust where, in judo, it's very hard to find somebody that's a shodan and up that's over the age of 40 that's still actually looking to be active instead of just standing on the sidelines.
This is actually one of I was on this conversation last night at the club, and this is one of my projects. Is I want to set up a sort of like a social, but competition-based session for the people that are sort of in that veterans category, who are looking to still train and compete, but with people of the same age, same physical abilities. Because we've got a few people at our club who are in the the 50s and the black belts, but then there's like one or two of them, and then if they want to train with anyone else, they're training with people, and they can train. Like I train with them, and I train to match the situation, right? But then there's other people at the club that might not necessarily understand that as well.
They don't understand, or they don't care.
They're in the 20s or late teens, early 20s, and they're just going hard. And you could just see that so I was like, what? There's I reckon there's, there's 2 or 3 people from my club, 2 or 3 people from another club who want to get together. And, we're going to set it up as trying to set it up as a social thing. But I definitely think there's something there just in terms of people wanting to still train and do randori, but with other people of the same physical output capabilities.
Yeah, I absolutely. I really think there's an untapped, and then if you can bring adult beginners into that situation, you can really create an environment where people can get something out of judo, and you can make long lasting friendships and relationships and stuff. And that's just been the wonderful thing with judo for me. And by extension, the podcast, the people that I've met through this podcast, is just, it's been a blessing for me. It's just been a wonderful addition to my life. I consider all my listeners friends, and I've got quite a bit of them, and I've been very grateful for judo, and I know I'm doing more Brazilian jiu-jitsu simply because where I currently live, that's the closest club, but I'm hoping to start up a judo club, and I want to make that judo club accessible for those same middle-aged adults that show up and that I train with. I want to show them, listen, you can take falls here. I'm not going to make you take 100 falls, but take 20 falls here. We'll get a crash pad. I'll show you things that actually work. I'll teach you how to grip and move and be efficient in your movements, and it's going to help your jiu-jitsu as well.
There are a couple of clubs in Sydney that I know that do have, they call it Dinosaur Judo. And the class is aimed at sort of beginners who are over 35 years old.
Yeah.
And they're very, very successful. And they kept at a sort of low pace. There's the social aspect, which again, I think is something that from my experience, so like BJJ have definitely tapped into better than judo ever has. And building a bit more of a community. And I think that's what people want in that later stage.
Absolutely.
I don't think that the importance of that is overly understood in judo sometimes.
I would agree. And, kind of going back to what I was discussing before about, Judo Australia's grading policy, I kind of wonder, when you draw these adults in, and one of these things that I can't stand when people say the grading and rank doesn't matter. I agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, if you put a concrete ceiling above, adult beginners saying, well, you got to, I remember years ago that the policy was any adult over 30 still had to earn their points in the senior division again. So if you're a 40-year-old guy trying to earn their shodan, you had to earn your points against people half your age, which I thought was insane. So I kind of wonder with Australia's policy, if it's possible to retain those adults, I've made this argument before. I kind of go back to jujitsu. One of the best coaches in jujitsu, in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is John Danaher. And I'm pretty sure his competitioner's record is 0 wins and 0 losses, but yet he's still a tremendous Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach. So I kind of wonder, when it comes to Australia's policy as an outsider looking in, does that policy, eliminate some people that could potentially be great judo coaches? Sure, maybe not at the world level, but you have a coach that can help other youngsters or start up a club and things like that. But if it's so difficult for them to earn the rank required just to be able to coach, is that a policy that's going to encourage growth or hinder it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's overcompensation, overcorrection, whichever. So I think because the competitive side of things here is a little bit lower, really, like generally speaking. Obviously there are some phenomenal athletes, but then broadly speaking, the competition level is lower here. Then so to counteract that, they've just increased the difficulty, the theory side. But sure. I don't think it necessarily translates well. I don't think it sort of makes up for it. I personally think it's good to have a high standard, but then
absolutely,
like you say, if it's too high, I think you're just gonna, like you say, potentially put people off. And
I read a story of somebody trying to earn their NIKU after being a Sankyu for like 8 years. Like, to me, that should never happen. No. If you're a regular competitor, but you're an adult, that should never happen. And the first guest I ever had on my podcast, he was a fellow that could never get his Shodan because he just, for, even though a lot of people say Shodan is just the first rank in the Dan ranks, and it's a beginner rank, relatively speaking, but there is something to be said about earning that Shodan, just like there's something to be said about earning a bachelor's degree or something along those. There's just something to be said about having that, even though a bachelor's degree doesn't make you a master in the field of study, but there's something to be said about that kind of achievement.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I know a few players. I think it's important to have a time on a belt, as in you can't just keep jumping grades every sort of 6 months or whatever. So I think it's important, but I think some of the time frames out here, I've got a few mates who are stuck type of thing. They've just got to wait another year or two to grade. And there's no way that this should be the grade of what they are. They're definitely above that. But they're just, this is what it says. You got to wait 4 years. Even though they've been international players, the coaching at a high level, but yeah, they can't grade.
I don't think that should ever happen. I think the way the United States does it is pretty balanced. I think the way a lot of other countries do it, I think the way that the UK does it is pretty fair. I think the fighting for a grade is tough, but I just recently learned that all these years I thought that you had to win all of your fights in one tournament, but I've recently learned it's something that you can earn points as slow or as fast as you need to. Yes. And I think that's a good system. I think that's a good system. It's different than the United States. In the United States, you can earn your rank faster if you earn competition points. But if you don't earn those points, if you don't earn all your points through competition, there are other ways. It's just a slower path, but there's still a path that is attainable and reasonable, at least in the US. And it seems that the UK has a theory path and a competition path. And I think it's a combination of both as well. I'm not sure exactly the particulars, but
yeah, it is.
Okay. So, yeah.
And it used to be, I think if you did it on the day you went to a grading and you won your line out, then you would automatically get those points. So I think if you won like 4 or 5 fights, I can't remember which one it was, then that was it, you were done. But in terms of individual competitions, the amount of points you needed were, I think it was like, say if you needed 100 points, right, from multiple competitions, versus if you went on the day and won all your fights on that day at a grading, then you automatically got signed off. So I think they did it in that context.
Right.
Well, I know like for my application to do my 4th Dan here, I had to submit competition points from the past sort of, I think it was like 8 years from when I got my 3rd Dan. And that wasn't me. That was just me being lazy. It's the only reason why it took me 8 years to do it. I could have done it sooner. I just sort of forgot about it. But it was competition points from.
Well, you're a national player. I mean, couldn't they just go on Judo Inside and look at your profile like I did?
I had to submit it. They're like, nope, you have to write it out and you have to submit it, and you have to submit, points for, being involved as a coach, points for if you're a referee. You get points for all these different categories.
Sure.
And you have to reach a certain amount. And then based on so say if it's like 4 years, you might have to do like 150 points made up of all these different aspects. If it's like 5 years, it might only be 100 points, for example. So the points do decrease, but then and then you have to go on the day and do this full grading demonstration, kata, this particular katas. I think for like 5 to 6, 5 to 6, then you have to do like 3 katas.
Well, really? Wow.
Yeah, and
I thought by 5th Dan they just voted on it. No. I think that's what they do in the United States. They once you hit your 4th, any rank after that, it's by committee.
No, you have to do full demonstration. I'm pretty sure it was three katas. It was the Goshin Jitsu. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the forms of elements. I call it the Earth, Wind, and Fire kata, but that's not right.
The forms, the Earth, Wind, and Fire kata.
Yeah, I can't remember the actual name of it is, but yeah, basically it's the forms. And then there's a 3rd one. And then you still have to do a demonstration of coaching. So you have to pick a technique standing and then basically coach that technique and multiple combinations and different styles of that technique. And then you have to do the same on the ground. And that's what you have to basically go through to get your grade.
Oh, wow. That's a lot, but it should be a lot. I mean, when you're talking about, ranks like Godan and stuff, it should be a lot. And and truth be told, I think I'm mistaken about the United States. They don't vote on rank until you reach your Rokudan, or unless you're up for Rokudan. The judo organization discuss that. I still think for Godan, there is a demonstration portion of your consideration for rank. At least I believe so. But yeah, that's, the standard should be, and that's kind of my thing. Shodan to me is a very low rank. Even though it's a big deal for a lot of people, it's still a low rank. You're talking your 4th and your 5th. The standards have to be exceptional. They should be exceptionally high. Not, I mean, I'll never see 4th. I'll never see 3rd. And I'm okay with that. But I think for anybody pursuing, further coaching, there needs to be higher ranking individuals to preserve that knowledge, because you're expected to know these things. So that there's an expectation for those people like yourself to pursue that knowledge and be able to demonstrate that knowledge so that you could teach it to others in the distant future.
Yeah. And I've always been, you've always known the pecking order in a club. I think the grade thing is obviously an element of that, but I'm a higher grade than some of the coaches at the Zembu, but like I know where I am in the pecking order. They're above me, type of thing. Sure. And it's and I understand that because I was always brought up the club in the UK I'm from, Bake-Up Judo Club. But it was always you knew who was boss. It didn't really matter what the belt was around the waist.
Of course.
You learn that. There's but yeah, like you say, those coaches that are a lower grade, they're just like, well, whatever. They just look at it and think, nah, my knees, I can't do that kata. My knees are shattered or whatever it is. It's just like, whatever. They just sort of put off by it.
Of course.
And they just don't, make that progression, even though they're definitely way higher than what they are. And there are players in the club that are probably a lot higher than they should be, really, in my opinion. I think that happens everywhere. You get people that are just like, I don't know, smart type of thing.
It's life. It's life. They, sometimes people, know how to work the system a little bit, and and that does happen.
Okay, Dave. We're coming up on an hour and a half, and I know you sort of said that was your time frame. So
I could keep going. I could keep going, but
I feel as though we've come to a natural conclusion then. Maybe we'll call it a do for today. But I really, really enjoyed that conversation. That an hour and a half flew by.
Likewise.
And like you're saying, for the podcast for myself, I mean, we've never. This is the first time we've ever spoken.
Absolutely,
we managed to churn out an hour and a half conversation.
It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Like I said, I could have keep going. I took notes in preparation here just to make sure that I'm always very well prepared when it comes to doing anything like this. So you were no exception. I came ready.
Well, I've got probably about 5 or 6 questions on my list here. I'm just looking now that I haven't got around to asking you either. So in the future, if you ever want to do this again, more than happy to.
Hey, and again, if you got time, I can keep going. I didn't realize an hour and a half flew by, but I've
got the time. I just know that you said the hour and a half. So I mean, I'm happy if you want to just do a little bit more.
Yeah, it's up to you. I probably got another half hour. If I get, so I got another half hour tops for me.
All right, well let's go.
We'll let your friend. You said Mel, the judo edit. Yeah, if she wants to edit all this stuff out, whatever. You go right ahead, Mel.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about the because I noticed you posted going back to the Reddit about the cancellation of Dusseldorf Grand Slam.
Yeah, that's a real shame. COVID. Before we get into this, how are things in Australia with COVID? Because I hear reports out here. I don't listen. I don't watch the news anymore, but sometimes I hear things like is Australia really locked down? I mean, are you opening up? Are you? So it seems like you're teaching judo. So clearly you've opened up in some way.
Yeah. So we've been up and down like a yo-yo in some ways.
You have. Okay.
And I personally, I think as inconvenient as it's been at times, I think the way it's been handled here has been pretty good.
Sure.
And if, at the end of the day, if saving lives is the ultimate goal, I feel as though Australia has done pretty well at achieving that. In terms of the population, the size of the country, we've had a very, very low death rate overall.
Of course. And I'm just curious because, going back to Dusseldorf, they're not able to run that Grand Slam, which was a Grand Slam that I was looking forward to because of the financial impact COVID has had in that country. And it's been a financial impact all over the world. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like some people, like as always, seem to have made out pretty well, or companies or whatever the case may be, especially in the United States. But be that as it may, it seems like with Dusseldorf, it's a financial issue. And I think that's a real shame because again, I mean, I know we're still early in the Olympic cycle, but those points are still important. Grand Slam points are huge.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing for me was the obviously the fact that Paris happened 2 weeks ago, and I only saw certain shots of the stadium, as a whole, but it looked absolutely packed to the rafters.
It was packed. Yeah, at least what I saw was packed. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever been to the Paris tournament?
No.
So we used to go every year. We used to go every year, and we'd watch the competition and sneak on the training camp. And I've never been to anything like it. Even the Olympics. The World Championships actually in Japan was huge in terms of just the crowd and the atmosphere. But every year, Paris, it was just absolutely packed, and I'd never seen anything like it for judo anywhere else ever. and the way the competition was put on, and it was huge. And then it looked no different. I mean, it was still at the Bercy Stadium,
Yeah.
and which is a huge venue.
I circle the Paris Grand Slam. I don't miss it. For me, in terms of me watching the IJF, it's the second most important tournament next to the World Championships on a year where there is not an Olympics.
Yeah,
I never miss it. It's a tremendous tournament. They turn out. I mean, I know France has seemingly 500,000 judoka in their country, so it's not hard for them to fill, a 14,000 plus seat arena. But yeah. So I would have thought maybe they could have made the money. Dusseldorf could have made the money by running the tournament, but maybe they know better. I don't know what kind of turnout. If they have restrictions that you still can't fill a building, I don't know what their COVID issue is.
Well, yeah, it was. I think because the camp has been cancelled as well, and I think the spectator numbers. But it's interesting because obviously France and Germany are relatively close countries,
right?
Right, in terms of in terms of what Australia's like, it's from one side of Australia to the other is further apart than France and Germany.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's interesting that I think I've never been to Dusseldorf, so as a spectator or even as an athlete, so I've only ever watched it. But you look at the list of athletes that compete at Dusseldorf is rivals the list that compete in Paris as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a huge competition. So I think
it is. It's a shame that it's been canceled. And I usually when a tournament's been canceled, it takes a long time for you to get it back.
Well, that's it. The momentum and like you say, the knock-on effect. Maybe not so much important this year in terms of points, but definitely next year and the year after.
Yep, absolutely.
I think going to have a huge impact. I wonder what they're going to use, which because usually a country steps up to replace it. Because I think there used to be the Dutch. There used to be the one was it in Rotterdam? There was a Grand Slam for a while, and then that one dropped out. And I think then the one in Brazil picked up picked it up.
Yeah, I would have to look at the calendar. I don't know if Brazil has a Grand Slam. IJF.org. Yeah, I'm just taking a look real quick to see if there's even a what are the Grand Slams? Yeah, I don't know if the IJF would change the points requirements for losing the Grand Slam, but yeah, you got Antalya, you got Tbilisi, Dusseldorf's been canceled. Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. Is that a new? Maybe I don't know if that's a new one.
That's interesting. You see, I would assume that Germany would be a far stronger country financially than some of the other ones.
Yeah,
and stronger in terms
hear you.
of judo. So it's quite an interesting development, really, in that respect. Whether it's
it really is
some other reason, and they're just using the financial thing as an excuse, but
yeah, but it's a real shame. It's a shame for the athletes for sure. We'll see how that impacts. I mean, there's plenty of other tournaments, but yeah, that's certainly, I'm sure a lot of people were. I would venture to guess you have athletes that circle certain tournaments that you can't go to every single one. So you pick and choose which tournaments you want to angle yourself to get the points that you need. And then when you lose it, it's got to be a big deal.
Yeah, it was always a good one to watch. Ono, he always used to seem to shine at that one for some reason.
Yeah.
He won it 3 or 4 times. So, obviously, we've got the new rules. We discussed that earlier. Moving into sort of the Olympics for 2024. What are your thoughts on how those Olympics are going to maybe look like after the 2020 Olympics?
It's going to be better. I think for judo, it's going to be amazing. I really do. I think, well, Japan had the unfortunate circumstance of trying to run a games during a pandemic. So there was no crowd there. But I really think, but I really hope anyway, but by the time 2024 rolls around in Paris, it's with these new rules and with that judo savvy crowd, that knows judo, boy, it's gonna be amazing. I can't wait. I really can't. It's just gonna be. I think it's gonna be bigger than Tokyo. For judo, and yeah, I don't know where they're gonna actually hold the event, but you can bet that place is gonna be rocking, and it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, well, sort of outside of Japan, in terms, I was just saying about the Paris tournament and the spectator rates there. Like, I think, I can't think really of any other country where you would get such a passionate crowd for the sport outside of Japan.
Yeah, Rio was good. Rio was pretty good though. I remember Rio was very good in that regard, but I think Paris is going to be amazing. We might not see anything like it. I know the 2028 games are going to be in Los Angeles, California. But I don't think we're going to see anything quite like Paris, and we won't see anything like Paris for a while after that, in my opinion, of course.
What did you make of the addition of the mixed team event?
I like it. It's really interesting to see certain athletes compete outside of their weight categories and still find success. I thought it was great to see, the French team win, the team event in the Olympics. It was good to see Israel. Israel got a medal, if I recall correctly, right?
They got bronze. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good to see Israel get a medal because they really had, as individuals, they did not have a good showing at the Olympics. I thought they were going to do a lot better than they actually did. But they managed to pull it together for the teams. I think it's great. I think it adds a unique element to the sport, and it was one that I think it needed.
Yeah, I think it was a really good addition. I've always been a big fan of team events. We used to have the national teams. I don't know if you have a team, like sort of a national level team event in America, but in
not
the UK,
that I'm aware of. No, we really don't. At least, or if we do, I'm not aware of them.
Yeah, in the UK, we every year we'd have the national team championships. So all the different counties would have a team, and then Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland would come as a country.
Oh, nice.
But then, in England, the different regions would put in a team, and it'd be a huge event. And it was great fun because you're still obviously the individual out in the middle of the mat on your own, but then if you go to a competition as like a normal competition, I don't care what anyone else does. Like I'm just interested in me and making sure I'm right and getting myself sorted. And I as bad as this may sound, like I really don't care what's going on with anyone else.
Right.
After the competition, then let's talk and let's do anything. But during the day, I'm just thinking what I need to do. But then you go to a team competition, and that whole attitude changes. And I think that's where you maybe if you look at the difference between how France competed and how Japan competed, especially in the final, France came together as a team. And I think that's interesting, the point you make about Israel, because they didn't have a good show in the individuals, and sometimes that's the motivator you need. And then you come together as a team. You're like, right, come on, let's do this. Let's make something of this trip, shall we?
Let's make something. Yeah, and they pull it out.
When you did team
competitions, yeah, absolutely. When you did team competitions, was it the same weight categories?
Yeah, so it was.
It was.
Yeah, so it wasn't mixed. We did it as you had men and then women, and it would be 7 men, 7 women in a team, and best of 7.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And it was good. It was great. Everyone's screaming and shouting and supporting the team and getting behind each other. It just creates a very different atmosphere that you just don't get, I don't think, in the individual events.
It's different. It's a nice change of pace. I do enjoy watching them. I don't watch it for every team event, but it's still neat to see.
The other thing, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I wonder what an open weight category would be like at the Olympics. You're saying there about the sort of the different players that got to compete against each other because of the mixing of certain weight groups.
Yeah.
What do you think of an open weight event?
Gosh, I think with open weight, I I I don't know if that would work. I mean, we have we have the plus 100 kilo divisions and we have the plus 78 kilo divisions on the women's side, but I can't imagine an under 81 kilo player trying their hand in open weight in events that matter. I think the idea is a neat idea. We do see open weight divisions in other grappling sports, but I don't know. I don't know what I would be curious. I'd be curious to see it happen on a lower level. Well, you have the All Japan, of course. That's always exciting, but I have mixed feelings on that. To tell you the truth, I don't think. I'll just say this: I don't think the IJF needs it. I think what they have right now is really great. I don't know. I don't know if having an open weight category adds anything. Adds interests. I don't know if from a financial standpoint what that might look like for them. If that would be, even if it was financially doable, I don't know if that would make sense financially. Just the extra day to do it, and maybe if it wasn't an extra day, but it's more time. I have mixed feelings on that.
He did run a world championship open weight a few years ago. I can't remember if
Did
it was
they?
2018, 2019. And they ran it as a completely individual, separate event. And it was just run on a week, like on one day of a weekend. And it was done as it might have even been earlier than that. I'm pretty sure really hardest fought in it. I can't remember who else. So whenever he was still competing. But yeah, I remember it being as an individual open weight world championship event.
I might have to take a look at that because maybe my opinion would completely change. I don't think I've ever watched an open weight tournament on the I'm not saying it's not like I've been watching the IJF World Tour for years and years and years. I've probably past 5 or 6 years. So if there was an open weight division in the past 6 years, I very easily could have missed it. I'll be interested to take a look and see what year that happened and see if I can find some video on that. That might be an interesting watch.
So do you think sort of the teams being a new addition and a new development sort of for the Olympic and well not just the Olympics, obviously the lead up to the Olympics who are running the team event. Do you think there's any other way for the IGF to evolve and bring something else in as a new element?
Gosh, as a new element,
now I'd imagine just to give you a little chance to think. Like I'd imagine they'd probably stay as they are for a while. Like, there's no need to be doing something like reinventing the wheel at every Olympic game. So I imagine now they will stick with this formula for a little while. But then there's obviously a point that's going to come where they're going to have to innovate and evolve.
Yeah, boy, what would if and I'm ignoring the idea of changing rules. I'm thinking strictly of how the IGF can maybe change. I don't even know how they could do it. I would like to see the athletes earn more prize money, bring in maybe more sponsorships, and really, because I maybe it's just me because I'm involved in judo. I think what we have on the IJF World Tour is a fantastic sport. I really think it's great. I think it's watchable, and I think the IJF could stand to do a better job marketing and giving more opportunities for the athletes to make even more money. I don't know how they can change, whether that's changing a format or whether that's changing the way that they do business. I don't know how they can. I'm just trying to think how they can make it better per se and make it more interesting. And yeah, that's a tough question for me. I would have to really think about it more more than this moment of being put on the spot.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I realized it was a bit of a curveball for you, maybe.
I've never once thought about that though.
We'll save that one for the next one, the next
Yeah.
podcast. I like your point about the prize money. I think when you see, I think it's like $100,000 or whatever, split between all the different medalists, and it just. I mean, judo. I'm not saying judo requires more or less, but it definitely equal to the majority of other sports. If we go with that in terms of having to compete and train at a professional level. I mean, I would probably, as I'm biased, I would say judo is harder than a lot of other sports.
I agree. Yeah,
and even regardless of there's the popularity. I don't put too much stock in that. I think judo is definitely popular enough in certain countries that there could be more prize money. And for me, it comes back to what you were saying earlier a bit about the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and just the way it's marketed and how the perception. And I think judo sometimes puts itself, we're just happy to get what we can get kind of attitude, rather than it being like, no, we are a dominant sport on the international stage and we deserve more.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu on a world stage is a blip compared to judo. And that's the truth. But for some reason, I think judo could do it. I think the athletes that win gold should get $100,000. Not just the prize pool be $100,000 or $150,000. I think the first place should get $100,000 and then work your way down from there. I mean, there's got to be a way. I know I see a lot of the advertisements for SOCAR, which is I believe an oil company in Azerbaijan. I mean, if judo is as popular as many people say there is around the world, how is it that a company like, well, I don't know. Do you have Budweiser out in Australia? It's a giant beer company. How is it that Budweiser is not sponsoring the event? Or McDonald's? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think I would like to see bigger sponsors get involved in the IJF and offer more prize money to the athletes. And I think that can really trickle down, and provide even more incentive for these athletes to you have that carrot, at the end of the stick, so to say, that that's something that the athletes can chase after, other than trying to chase for an Olympic medal. The Olympic medal is the ultimate, of course, but in the meantime, I think there's opportunities there. I know in other countries, let's say, Daria Bieludid of the Ukraine. I know she does commercials for Mitsubishi. I know Teddy Riner does commercials for Adidas. I know Fabio Basile was on Dancing with the Stars in Italy. Like, there's opportunities for some of these athletes when they win. But I would like to see maybe some of that success trickle down to, silver medalists and bronze medalists and 5th and 7th place finishers. Those are all high placements in these competitions. And I would like them to get some more money from sponsorship dollars. I think that would be a really good thing.
Yeah. The examples you gave are the exceptions, not the rule.
Right.
There's
exactly.
like a few little exceptions in the sport, and you look at. It's hard to draw comparisons sometimes. We had the Australian Open tennis recently, and I know you guys got the American Open, and the prize money, the pot of prize money is something like, I don't know, it's north of $20 million.
Yeah,
and again, that's spread out throughout, but like that's you could 20 million compared to like 100,000. And I know there's obviously the 4 main sort of tennis tournaments, but at all their lower level tournaments, the prize money is ridiculous. And
it's ridiculous.
People that are going out first round get a piece of that pie.
Yeah, they do.
$40,000 or something like that for going out. I'd be a millionaire. The amount of first rounds I went out.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with golf. Golf around the world, it's similar. You can you can make a lot of money being a loser, I guess. If you're on the tour, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be interested to know what the spectator rates for something like golf, or even like for tennis. I know people get behind the tennis here when it's the Australian Open, but I don't, I never hear of people talking about the tennis tour. in the interim, yet those tournaments are still getting an absolute ton of prize money. So
Yeah,
I
in the
don't.
United States, the four majors in tennis get a lot of
Yeah,
get a lot of attention for
but
sure, and
none
same
of
with
the other
golf.
events, right?
Not so much unless they're local events, like if you know, local events in the area will get attention, but not like not like the Grand Slam events.
Maybe a better comparison then, maybe to talk about, you maybe know more about this than I would be the wrestling scene in America. Because
So
that seems to
wrestling,
me, as an outsider, that seems to be huge.
yeah. So wrestling, and it just kind of goes back to leg grabs a bit. Why I think that they should be allowed from a national level, and we the United States has a strong wrestling culture. It's so strong here that we even watch fake wrestling. We watch the WWE. So the United States has a huge wrestling culture. I would love to see USA Judo, just an example. Um, there's guys that wrestle for USA Wrestling, and they have a completely different structure than judo in the United States. So they obviously have the high school scholastic pipeline. You really have a strong pipeline going from 6 and 7 year olds all the way through college, and some of those guys represent um, the country in the Olympics. But you have a lot of guys that just missed that cut to representing Team USA for wrestling. I would love to see Team USA and judo reach out to those kind of guys, wrestling's quote unquote rejects who are phenomenal athletes, and say, hey, why don't you come do judo for a couple of years, and try and earn some points in events? Because I mean, look, judo's hard, right? But it's not so hard for an elite level athlete. It's not. I mean, I don't see judo as significantly technically more demanding than wrestling, because wrestling is a very technical sport. But in the United States, the collegiate national championships will get coverage on ESPN, but other than that, you will rarely see television coverage of freestyle or folk style wrestling in the United States, unless it's a major local state tournament. For example, Iowa University going against Oklahoma. That might get some television coverage in the Midwest, but there's not as much television coverage for wrestling as you would think in the United States.
Do you think that judo could eventually have the same kind of culture and integration in the school system as wrestling in America?
No, that ship sailed about 40 years ago. And I'm sure people are going to get bent out of shape for me even bringing this up, but judo in the United States had an opportunity to be a collegiate sport. There was a vote on this apparently in the early 1980s. And the powers that be at the time, apparently it was a close vote whether they should have NCAA inclusion or not. And the powers that be, the majority voted that they didn't want the NCAA dictating what judo could look like. So they voted against it. And honestly, from a growth point of view, I bet you if you were to look, there was a time when judo in the United States probably had about 250,000 participants across all levels, whether that's recreational or high level competitors. And now at best, I would venture to guess, because of the pandemic, we probably have no more than 15,000. I think judo making the decision to not become an NCAA sport was a bad one. And judo will never, ever have that opportunity again. Why would they? It's an extremely obscure sport where, the greatest judoka in American history, Kayla Harrison, won gold twice, and nobody knows who she is here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame.
It's a shame. It really is a shame.
Craig Fallon in the UK,
Yeah, exactly.
One of the few athletes to ever be, I think only one of three men to win the world championships, and then won the world and European championships. And people just you'd ask someone in the street who he was, and they would have no idea.
People have no idea. And you knew him personally, right?
Yeah. So he was a little bit older than me.
But he was okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I trained on the squads with him, and I'd lived in
Sure.
Camberley, and he was living in Camberley, and a lot of my teammates were of a similar age, and they trained with him at Bisham Abbey. And if I went down there to train, so I knew him.
Yeah.
Not well, but yeah, I
No,
get trained,
of course.
that type of thing. So,
Right.
but even like Neil Adams, for example, most people don't know who Neil Adams is in the UK, and like double Olympic silver and world champion.
Yeah. I knew of his brother Chris because I was a big wrestling fan growing up. He was the gentleman Chris Adams in the United States. He wrestled all over different promotions here, professional wrestling. So I remember him, and I only found out years later that it was actually Neil's brother, the gentleman Chris Adams. So yeah.
Oh, okay, I never knew that.
You didn't know that? Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, like I said, I think it really does come down to how the sport markets itself, and compared. And so, my new project, my new hobby is Olympic lifting. I've not been doing it that long at all, but I have noticed very early on the number of similarities between judo and Olympic lifting, and then also for them it seems to be CrossFit is their, to us BJJ is that thing that's very similar that seems to have gained so much popularity.
Oh, really?
For
that's
Olympic lifting, there's like that similar attitude, but towards CrossFit, right? And I think it really does just come down to how it's marketed in terms of people's perception.
Yeah, yeah, CrossFit is huge in the United States. I've never done it. I would prefer doing judo, but yeah, I can't think of an Olympic weightlifting gym anywhere in Florida. Not that I think of it. I'm sure they're out there, but I can't think of any formal training center. But I see CrossFit everywhere.
Yeah, and then I stumbled across the gym that I go to, and it just because I was doing my Australian Strength and Conditioning Association coaching qualification, and you need to be mentored by a coach. And then so I just picked one that was close by. So this club was 5 minutes away from where I live, and never even heard of it. And I was talking to the coach, and turns out he was the coach for the Australian Olympic team for 4 Olympic Games. And he's like one of the best coaches in the world, type of thing.
He's right there. He's right there, huh?
He's like 5 minutes from my from where I live, and I would never have known that type of thing. So again, just no marketing, just exists without any kind of push. But then I could tell you about 5 or 6 CrossFit gyms in the area, and I've never done CrossFit.
Right.
We'll save that conversation for another time.
Yeah,
we'll go deep on that one. What needs to be done. But squeeze another half an hour out of you. But I think
that sounds good to me. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, David. It's like I said, I love talking judo. I could talk all night.
I really appreciate your time, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Likewise, and we'll keep in touch for sure.